You saw it the first time. You just didn't believe it. Not in a dramatic moment. Not in a confession. Not in the kind of scene you could point to later and say, "That was when I knew." It was smaller than that. A comment that landed slightly wrong, and you told yourself you were being sensitive. A promise that quietly disappeared, and you told yourself they were just busy. A moment where they chose themselves over you, and you told yourself that was reasonable. You noticed every single one of those moments. And then, with a patience and creativity that should honestly impress you, you explained every single one of them away. Because the alternative, believing what you saw, would have cost you something you were not ready to lose. So you kept the story, and the story kept you comfortable. Until it didn't. Until the thing you explained away the first time became the thing that finally broke something, and you sat there wondering how you didn't see it coming. But you did see it coming. You saw it the very first time. The problem was never the seeing. It was never that you missed it, or that you were naive, or that you weren't paying attention. Plato, who understood human blindness better than almost anyone who has ever lived, had a name for exactly what happened to you. And once you understand what he saw in the cave, in the shadows, in the fire behind the wall, you will never explain away a pattern again. Before I show you what Plato saw, I want to give you 3 things you can use today. Not philosophy yet, not theory, not another framework to carry around in your head without knowing what to do with it. 3 practices for the specific blindness you have been living inside, probably for longer than you realize. The first practice, the pattern log. For the next 7 days, write down 1 observation per person you interact with regularly. Not judgments, not feelings about them, just observations. The thing they did when nothing was at stake. The comment they made when they thought you were not paying attention. The small choice they made when the cost of a different choice would have been so minor it barely registered. After 7 days, read what you wrote. The pattern will be there. It was always there. You were simply not writing it down, and unwritten things are very easy to explain away. Written things are harder because they exist somewhere outside the story you are trying to protect. The second practice. The first impression file. Think of someone in your life who eventually disappointed you. Now write down your first impression of them, before you knew them well, before you had invested anything, before you had built a story that needed protecting. What did you notice in the first hour? In the first week? What did something in you register before your mind got involved and started explaining? Write it honestly, and then compare it to what eventually happened. In almost every case, you will find that your first impression and the eventual truth are the same thing. The data was always there. You simply chose at some point to trust the story more than the data. The third practice, the behavior question. The next time someone tells you who they are, in words, in promises, in declarations of how much they value you, ask yourself 1 question before you respond. Does their behavior match this? Not sometimes. Not in the good moments, not when they are being watched or when something is at stake for them. Consistently, over time, when nothing is at stake. When the cost of showing you something different would be 0. Because Plato said the fire is what is real, and the shadow is only what the fire produces. Words are shadows. Behavior is fire, and you have spent too long studying the shadows. Try those 3 things this week, and then come back, because what Plato actually discovered about why you ignore what people show you is darker and more liberating than anything I've told you yet. The reading was never the problem. The believing was. Because Plato did not just describe a cave. He described the specific moment when someone finally turns around, sees the fire directly, and then, despite everything, chooses to look back at the wall. And And the reason they choose to look back is the most important thing he ever wrote. You know the cave. Prisoners chained since birth, facing a wall, watching shadows move across it. Behind them, a fire. Between the fire and the prisoners, figures passing. The shadows are all the prisoners have ever known, so the shadows are their reality, and the prisoners are very good at understanding the shadows, at predicting them, at building an entire world of meaning around them. And then one prisoner turns around. Most people hear the cave story and think about television, about social media, about the manufactured reality we are all fed from the outside. Plato meant something closer than that. He meant the stories you build about the people you love. The version of someone you know is not them. It is the version they present in good moments, in observed moments, in moments when something is at stake for them. That version is the shadow on the wall, convincing, consistent, familiar, real enough that you have built your life around it. The fire, the actual person, is visible only in the unguarded moments. The thing they said when they were tired and stopped editing themselves. The way they reacted when they felt threatened and forgot to perform. The choice they made when they believed the cost of a different choice was too small for you to notice. That is the fire. That is who they actually are. And you have been watching the shadow, calling it the truth, and wondering why the truth keeps disappointing you. Carl Jung understood this from a different angle. He called it projection, the way the mind takes what it needs a person to be and layers it over what that person actually is. You do not see people clearly, not because you lack the ability, but because seeing them clearly would require you to update a story you have already decided to keep. The story justifies the investment. The story makes the relationship make sense. The story turns the shadow into something you chose deliberately. And the mind will protect that story with a creativity and persistence that would be genuinely impressive if it were not so costly. Because here is what makes this harder than it sounds. People do not show you who they are in dramatic declarations. They show you in the smallest possible moments, the ones you are most likely to dismiss. The comment that was slightly too sharp and slightly too true. The favor they remembered to forget, when remembering it would have cost them something. The way they talked about the last person they were close to, with just enough contempt to tell you something important, not enough for you to feel justified in noticing. The way they behaved at the moment they believed the stakes were too low for it to count. Those moments are not footnotes. Those moments are the whole text. And you have been reading the footnotes and calling them anomalies, when the truth is that the anomalies have been trying to tell you something for years. You did not miss the signs. You overruled them. Here is the part that most conversations about reading people never reach. The problem is not that you cannot read people. You can. You do it constantly, almost automatically, with a precision that would genuinely surprise you if you paid attention to it. You felt it every time. The discomfort in your body when something was slightly off. The thought you had and immediately dismissed as paranoia. The thing you almost said and chose not to say, because you did not want to be the kind of person who says that. The problem is not the reading. The problem is what you did with what you read. And there are 3 specific reasons why you override what you already know. And none of them are stupidity. None of them are weakness. And all of them are completely human. The first reason is the story. When what you see contradicts what you have already decided, the investment you have made, the identity you have built around this relationship, the version of your life that requires this person to be who you need them to be. Your mind does not update the decision. It discredits the evidence. It finds an explanation that preserves the story. Because the story is not just about them. The story is about you. The story is the choice you made. And if the choice was wrong, then something about your judgment was wrong. And that is a cost most people are not willing to pay. when there is a cheaper alternative available. The cheaper alternative is a better explanation. The second reason is the void. Believing what you see often means accepting that something you valued is not what you thought it was. That the relationship you organized your life around was organized around a performance, not a person. That the years were real, the investment was real, the love was real, and the person you directed all of it toward was showing you something different the whole time. That loss is genuinely devastating, and the mind, which is very good at protecting you from devastation, will choose the shadow over the fire every single time the fire is painful enough. The third reason is hope. Nietzsche said something that has stayed with me since the first time I encountered it. He said hope is not the most rational of responses. It is the most human. Hope says, this time will be different. This time the pattern will break. This time the person will become the story I need them to be. Hope is not irrational. It is just that hope is not evidence. And somewhere along the way, you started treating them as the same thing. Marcus Aurelius wrote something in his private journal that he never intended for anyone to read. He wrote it to himself, not as instruction, not as philosophy, not as the kind of wisdom an emperor puts on display for the people who will record it. He wrote it at night, alone, in the specific privacy of a man who had spent all day surrounded by people performing versions of themselves for his benefit. He wrote, the first step is, don't be deceived. Not don't be betrayed. Not don't be lied to. Don't be deceived. Because he understood that deception is not always something done to you. Sometimes deception is something you participate in, quietly, with great skill, because the alternative is a clarity you are not yet ready to hold. The Stoics called the discipline he was describing prosos, attention to what is actually present, not what you wish were present, not what was present in better moments, not what might be present if circumstances were different, what is actually present right now in this behavior, in this pattern, in this fire that has been burning behind the wall the whole time. And here is the reframe that changes everything about how this feels. Most people think that seeing people clearly is a cold act, that it is suspicious or cynical or the kind of thing that closed hearts do. It is the opposite. The most loving thing you can do for another person is to see them as they actually are, not as you need them to be, because the person you see clearly is the person you can actually know. The person you have covered with the story you need them to fit is a fiction, and you cannot love a fiction. Not really. Not in the way that means anything. You can only maintain it, at a cost to yourself that compounds quietly for years, until one day you sit down and realize you are exhausted, and you do not entirely know why. This is what changes when you learn to believe what you see. Not cynicism, not the closed heart that trusts no one, not the person who walks into every room already looking for the exit. Something more precise and more powerful than that. Discernment, the specific ability to receive information from the world without immediately filtering it through what you wish were true. The person who sees clearly does not love less. They love more accurately. They invest in what is actually there, rather than in what they hope will appear if they are patient enough, and forgiving enough, and willing enough to explain things away one more time. They end things when the evidence tells them to end them, not 3 years after the evidence told them to end them, which means they end them without the accumulated resentment of 3 years of overruling what they already knew. They trust the people whose behavior over time has earned that trust, not the people whose words have requested it. And the relationships they build from that place are built on something real, something that does not require constant maintenance of a story, something that does not ask them to be a little less perceptive than they actually are. And there is one more thing. The person who sees clearly is the person other people most want to be seen by, because being truly seen, not the performance version, not the story version, but the actual version, is one of the rarest experiences available to a human being. Most people spend their entire lives being responded to by someone else's projection of who they need them to be. The person who sees clearly responds to what is actually there, and that response, however uncomfortable it is in the moment, is the most genuine form of connection that exists. Go back to that moment. The comment that landed slightly wrong, the silence that lasted a beat too long, the small thing they did when they thought it was too minor to be remembered. You were right. You have always been right, and now you know why believing it was so hard. Not because you were foolish, not because you were weak, not because something in you was broken, because you were human, because the story was comfortable, and the investment was real, and hope is the most human response to an unbearable truth. But Plato showed you the fire, and Marcus Aurelius showed you the discipline. And now you have the one thing they were both pointing toward. Not the ability to see better, you already see. The ability to believe what you have always seen. The cave was never about society, it was always about the one person you kept giving one more chance. Before you leave this video, I need you to do one uncomfortable thing. Think of one person, just one, someone you explained away. In the comments, drop a number, the number of times you saw it before you finally believed it. 1, 3, 7. More. No name. No story. Just the number. Because naming it is the first step towards seeing clearly, and you are not alone in the cave. I read everyone.